Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the sixth in our series of Performance Puzzle webinars. I'm Gary Cookson, I'm your host for the next 25 minutes, and today we're going to be looking at use of social media by organisations for its own employees as opposed to for its customers. If you've not met me before, some of you will have, some of you won't. Quite apt really that today's webinar is about social media, because if you want to stalk me on social media, these are the things you see about me. This is my life here. You'll see that I've got 20 years experience working at HR director level in a range of different sectors around the northwest of England. You'll see as well, I've got a young and growing family. Even that picture is out of date now. I've added a fourth child to that list as if three weren't enough. And you'll see that I do a range of different speaking, writing, presenting, training on a lot of different HR, L&D and OD topics, as well as working with MOL Learn as an associate tutor. MOL Learn, if you've not come across us before, part of the LTE group. You can have a look at the LTE group online, and there's some information about the kinds of courses that the LTE group through MOL run available in the handouts section on the GoToWebinar panel. There's 3 documents there with examples of some of the HR qualifications that MOL provide. But today we're looking at the performance puzzle. So what do we mean by that? Well, we're going to go on for about 20 minutes today, or at least my content is going to be about 20 minutes. That leaves a bit of time at the end for some questions. If you've got any questions, then use the chat panel and pop them in there, and I'll be able to answer those either as we go through if I spot them, or at the end if I don't. If you want to tweet along today, you can tweet using the Performance Puzzle hashtag, or you can tweet at MOL Learn. And again, quite apt given that we're talking about social media today, so feel free to use that. If you've not used GoToWebinar before, then you'll be in listen only mode at the moment. You've got use of the chat facility if you want to ask any questions. You've also got use of the polls facility and the questions facility. So we're going to use all of those today. And you should be able to see my screen and we should be ready to go. And the performance puzzle is 12 linked webinars, and we're on number 6 today. And if you've not come across the first 5, then they've all been recorded and you can access them by contacting MOL Learn. And the remaining 6 are going to focus on a range of different things, and you may have seen that just before they disappeared. But today's about social media, and particularly 3 things I want to try and cover today. Firstly, understand why an organization might want to be using social media for its employees, by its employees. Lots of organizations use it for their customers and use it for their external facing brand, and do so very, very well, but not as many use it internally. So we're going to look at particularly why and what might be stopping people using it for things like employee engagement, but also some things like L&D as well. So we're going to look at some of the ways in which organizations can do that. Now, we're only here for 25 minutes, so we're not going to cover loads of things today, but I'll give you some examples of companies doing things really well, and we'll examine some of the barriers and give you some hints and tips that you can go off and explore. And if you're interested in talking more to me or anybody at MOL Learn about what we're doing in social media and how organizations can do it better, then by all means contact me or MOL Learn after the event and we can talk to you in a bit more detail. So let's get going then. Firstly, I wanted to share some beliefs, or rather myths, about social media. And when I talk to people about social media, and I talk a lot about social media because I use it a lot, organizations will usually peddle one or more of these things here to me. They'll tell me that they do social media, but they only do it during office hours. Well, that's not something you can do anymore. Your customers, your potential job applicants, the people who you want to engage with, whether they be inside or outside your organization, don't just use social media Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. In fact, what you probably find is they use it outside of those times more than they do inside of those times. So social media for engaging your employees can't be something you do during office hours. You need to be able to devote time and effort to it. People are always scared as well about bad comments, negative comments, and I don't think you should be scared of them. They can be damaging, yes they can, but they give you a real opportunity to display the very best of your brand and to recruit your employees into becoming brand ambassadors. but it isn't easy. People seem to think that you can just tweet now and again, once every couple of days, you can post something on Facebook. It isn't easy to do it, and you do need a plan. You do need to know where you're going with it, how you're going to interact with all the different platforms, and what you're going to get out of them. And you need to be able to do it almost all of the time. It's not something you can give to an apprentice to do, and that's something that I've seen many organizations fall into the trap of doing. Give it to somebody who would typically be quite young, maybe just out of college or university, on the basis that they might understand social media a bit more. Well, that, to be honest, is perpetuating some of the problems and myths about social media. That person may understand it more, but they won't be able to use all of the resources of the organization in the way that more senior leaders can. And therefore, it's not something that you can get the comms team or the marketing team to very tightly control. Organizations who do that are missing the point about the inclusivity that social media gives employees. And organizations often will use it just from a customer facing perspective. And there's loads of good things happening from a customer facing perspective, and we'll look at some of those today. But it's usually when employees get involved in it and when organizations use it to engage their employees that you get the best from social media. So I'm going to launch a poll in a second, and the question for this poll is about why your organization might not be making the best use of social media at the moment. What are the reasons why you might not be getting the best from it? So have a look at this poll. Feel free to vote whenever you're ready. What's the reason why your organization's not making the best? And if you've gone for the fourth option, which is something else, then pop your views in chat. What are the reasons why you're telling us there, so I can comment on some of those? I'll just wait for a few more people to vote. There's about half the audience have voted at the moment. So somebody's telling us in the questions poll, it's a lack of resource. Yeah, that's often a barrier. People think that it's something you need to devote almost full-time attention to. In actual fact, it's not. And I think sometimes that's one of the myths that people think, that it's got to be somebody's job to do social media. It's not. It's everybody's job in the organization. Everybody spending 15, 20 minutes a day, maybe not even that, would make a significant impact on things. And if you think about how often people use social media outside of work, people are spending an hour and a half to 2 hours a day on social media. It's a natural progression for them to want to do that in the workplace. You're pushing an open door. So resource is not necessarily the barrier that some people think it might be. So most people have voted now. I'm going to close the poll and share some of the results so you can see these. And most people are saying it's too risky, or they're afraid of the repercussions. Other people telling us they're not convinced of the benefits. And those are the majority of people telling us these things. And that's not too surprising. And that's why we're running this webinar. And that's why I do sometimes full day workshops on things like social media use for employers and how to use it in your engagement strategies. Because people are afraid sometimes. People are not quite sure what they can get from it. So we'll try and explore some of those things today. So I'll hide those poll results for you, and then after that you should be able to go back to looking at my screen. So let's have a look at some of the stats that are relevant for this, and this is the why you should be using social media. You've got the vast majority of the UK population, probably worldwide population too, using social media with access to the internet. That's very different than it was 10 years ago. And most people are accessing the internet at least once a day, multiple times a day. Most people are doing it through a mobile device, and in fact, over half of the people who are using Facebook have never used a laptop or a PC to access the internet or social media. They've only ever done so through a mobile device. And all of your employees are very likely to have a mobile device of their own, possibly one that you've given them in the organization as well. And you should be using that as a tool to communicate with them, because that's how they communicate with their friends, with their family. My children, who are aged 16, 13, 3 and 4 months, are growing up in a world where social media has been the predominant way of communicating for almost their entire life. Even my 16-year-old, who was born in 2001, came into a world where social media didn't exist, but nowadays it's the thing that he uses to communicate with all his friends, with his tutors at college, with me sometimes, and even my 13-year-old will send me a Snapchat from another room in the house asking what time tea's ready. And there are drawbacks to that level of communication, but it's the way they do it. It's the way they're communicating in the schools, in the colleges, with the friends and socially. And therefore, when they get into the workplace in a few years' time, they're going to expect to communicate with colleagues like that. They're going to expect their managers to be able to send them Snapchats and communicate with them using the different filters on there. They're going to be posting Instagram stories of what's going on in your organization. And why wouldn't you allow that? If that's what they're used to, then let them do it. The fact that we're not used to that says more about us than it does about them. And we need to be recognizing that we're swimming against the tide with social media and grasp it, because it's what the incoming generations into work want to use, and they'll bring their devices with them in order to do that. So let them do it and just tap into the momentum that's already there. But not easy. So I'm going to give us another poll, and the poll in a second is going to be this. I'm going to ask you what social media presence your organization has at the moment. And you'll be able to tick as many of these as apply. So I'm going to open this poll for us in a second, and you'll be able to tell us what online social media presence does your organization have, and tick as many of these as apply. And if it's something else, then tell us in chat as well. And if you only want to go for one particularly, maybe the main one, then go for that. But by all means, have a look at all of them. So the reason why I ask this is that sometimes organizations will actively consciously manage a social media presence, but sometimes they are out there and they have a presence, but they don't know about it, or they're not actively managing it. Your organization has a presence on social media, whether you control it or not. People are talking about your organization. Are you listening? Maybe, maybe not. And does what other people say about your organization, does what your employees tell other people on social media about their experiences of working for you match what you want them to say and how you present yourself on your own website? These are what you might call the down the pub conversations, but often they're taking place where more than just a few people can view them. And so it's interesting to see what's coming back on this. I'll just leave the poll going for another 20 seconds or so before I close it. But I can see at the moment quite a mix of things coming through, and I'll share the results in a second. Other people saying they're using total jobs as a way of establishing their presence, and that's one good way of doing it, because you can have a profile on total jobs, and particularly from a recruitment perspective that might be appropriate, but for other things it might be some of the other ones. So I'm going to close this poll now. Most people have voted, and I'll share these results with you. So what can we see here? Well, most people have a presence on Indeed. Now, I wonder though whether that's a presence that you've created yourself, or a presence that is just there because you've posted jobs and people have reviewed your company. The same with Glassdoor, so that's an interesting one. Lots of people using Google reviews, few more people using LinkedIn, Facebook, and other people saying they use Twitter as well. I think as an organization, you're able to use all of these. All of them, and you should investigate using all of them. Whether or not you do is entirely up to you. You've got to have the right fit for your company culture and the people you're trying to engage with. But why don't you ask your employees what social media sites they are on? And if they're all on Twitter, then you as an organization should be using Twitter to talk to them. If they're all on Instagram, then you should be using Insta to talk to them. If they're all on Snapchat, then you'd be a fool not to be using Snapchat to talk to them and to train and develop them as well. So let's close this poll down and move on, because I've got a few more things to share with you. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen again now. So moving on, examples of companies doing it really, really well. Now I've put a few examples here, and I'm going to show you a couple. I'm just going to start off with the Virgin Trains one. This is a very well-known one. Virgin Trains one here, you can have a look at it. This is obviously a customer-facing one, but you can see here the personal touch coming through from the employee. They've signed it. You can see that they're on it. They're using it to engage customers, and building the brand as well. It's really, really good. And look at the engagement levels they've got on that. Look at the number of retweets, the number of likes, and look at the time of day as well. This is 10:15 in the evening. So there's an employee using social media at 10:15 in the evening. It's not something you can do 9 to 5. Then you've got Waterstones. Waterstones another good example of companies doing it well. Waterstones here, again, look at the time of day, nearly 11 o'clock at night. In fact, the response is after midnight. Look at the number of engagements, likes and retweets. Again, this is people tweeting like people in a company, not tweeting like a company, which is a good piece of advice. Having a human and a personal touch to how they present the organization on social media. You've got BT, using it from a customer perspective, but using it to deliver services. And again, look at the names coming through on the tweets from the people in the BT customer service team. So your customer service teams in organizations should be using social media to deliver some of the basic services to communicate with customers. It shouldn't be something that your organization restricts use of. People can use it, build the brand, deliver services in a very good way. You can use it for employer branding as well. This is L'Oreal using Instagram to share what it's like to work in their organization. So they're building an employer brand. They're looking at employee engagement. They're having little competitions and little get-togethers and social events using Instagram, which is a fantastic way of doing it. And you've got other examples too, and you can see some there. So you can see some hashtags that museums tend to use. You can see how the health sector tend to use social media as well. You can see cancer research using it as well. And we could go on. We could go a full day looking at examples of companies using it well. And in all of these cases, what you see is it's not a corporate communication channel. These are employees themselves being trusted and allowed and encouraged to use social media for the good of the organization. And that's what it should be. That's really what social media is about. So learn from some of these, look at your own examples too, and try and find out what your organization could use it for. And I think there's probably plenty of examples that you could use it for. I've got a third poll to share with us now, third question, and it's going to be this one. It's about internal social media and whether you've used it or not. So I'm going to open this poll for us, and this should be opening any second now. And tell us if you used internal social media. It doesn't matter what platform it is. Could be Facebook at work, could be Yammer, could be Slack, could be Microsoft Teams, anything like that, any you like. Have you used it? Did it work? If so, what kind of results did you get? And if not, do you want to? So this is interesting. I can see straight away, before I can share the results with you, very, very mixed response to this one. So I'll let this go a little bit longer before I close it. Why would you want to use internal social media anyway? You can build networks and communities across organizations. You can engage with remote workers who may only have a mobile device and they can access it on an app. You can improve the visibility and accessibility of senior leaders because you can contact them straight away and know it goes straight to them. You can support more effective corporate communications as well. So loads of good stuff there. Real-time communication, real-time collaboration. You can build knowledge networks and you can deliver learning through internal social media platforms as well. So I've closed that one down. I'm going to share the results here. Look at the mix here. Quite a few people say no, they've never used it. Some saying yes and we use it really well, but most people saying yeah, but mixed results. Often you find with internal social media there's a bit of momentum that needs to get behind it. It needs to be used for the right reasons and the right people need to be using it for the right things. So there does need to be a strategy before the launch. And I've used things like nudge theory very, very well to convince people to use social media internally, like only sharing news about a particular merger on the new internal social media app. It instantly got 100% of all employees going on there. Once they were on there, we could show them other things. So you use it wisely. But what else can you use it for? I'm going to hide the results of this poll and move on to a couple more things that you could do with this. So what can you do with social media? 3 things. Most organizations will have social media being used for talent acquisition in the recruitment sphere. And that's great. That's about employer branding. That's about getting the right people to come to your door and understand why they're applying for a job with you. Brilliant. But not many use it for engagement and L&D. So let's look at L&D first. If you look at the top 100 learning tools as published each year by the Centre for Learning and Performance Technology, then 9 out of the top 20 are social media apps. Social learning, this is learning by doing, by collaborating, by talking to other people, is the biggest form of learning that there is. And social media just gives it a platform to happen. You can get user-generated content, collaborative tools, just-in-time bite-sized learning, and that's all through social media. So if your L&D strategy does not harness the platform that social media gives you, then you're missing out on perhaps as much as 70% of the effective learning that can happen in organizations. Then for engagement, again, that's usually through internal social media. If your culture supports employee voice, then it will be a natural extension of this to offer internal social media. You need to be open to a loss of some control. You need to trust people. You need to make sure senior leaders are involved in creating that culture of voice, promoting the tools, using social media themselves. You can have champions to encourage others to use the technology. You can link it into work-related discussions and collaborate things, but encourage some non-work related use as well. You might want to have a policy about it, but develop it with staff involvement too. And you can integrate it with other voice platforms. It's not a replacement for anything, it's an add-on to things. And there are loads of organizations, just going back to the talent acquisition sphere as well, doing fantastic things. You can look at Microsoft and their use of social media. Look at Halton Housing Trust, look at Zappos, look at SAS Software, look at Argos, look at Sodexo. And if you're on Snapchat, then look at McDonald's, look at Airbnb, and look at Cisco. There's loads of organizations doing really well and tapping into the new generations coming into work and using them to attract the right talent. But then once they're there, using the same social media platforms to engage them and to help them learn and develop. It's not something that stops as soon as somebody's applied for a job with you. And those companies are good examples of that. So my final thoughts then in the last couple of minutes. I think with social media now, there's a tide and we're swimming against the tide if you're not using it. We don't have a choice about doing social media. We only have a choice about how well we do it. If it's used well, if it's used for the right reasons, it can be used to deliver loads of different HR and leadership objectives, and it can deliver increased engagement from your employees. However, like most things, only by giving people freedom to express themselves and relating to them in an adult way can we really get the best from them and unlock the next part of the performance puzzle. So that's all the content that I had from today. I'm just going to scan chat and questions just to see if anybody else has asked anything. I can see a few people giving examples in questions about things they've been using, and that's great. So keep examples coming. At the moment, I can't see any questions in chat, but if anybody's got any, please either pop them in the questions panel or pop them in chat, or tweet us using the performance puzzle hashtag, and we'll be able to answer those after the event. So hopefully what we've tried to do today is give you a flavor of some of the things that your organization can use social media for. And often what you'll find is most people are using it just for recruitment. Some great things happening there, no problem with that. But don't let that be the end of it. Don't use social media to recruit people if once they're through the door, you tell them to turn the phones off. There's a wealth of things you can do with engagement and with L&D that you should be using it for. And hopefully, as a result of this, you might have some ideas. But if you have any further questions, by all means, tell us afterwards. And I can see somebody's asked me a question of, do I have examples of policies that organizations might use? I can give you examples of policies, but you can Google lots as well. I wouldn't necessarily advocate following a good practice template. It's got to be right for your organization. I've wrote 12-page social media policies, and I've also seen them done in 4 words. So it's got to be right for your organization, and let your employees write it. rather than using one that somebody else has done. So that'd be my advice with that one. Look at examples, but don't use them as templates. And if somebody's asked, do we email MOL to get access to the other 5 webinars? Yes, you do. They'll be able to give you access to all the links for those ones, and hopefully you'll be able to join us at some of the remaining 6. So that's going to be me done for today. I hope you've found it useful. By all means, contact me on social media, contact MOL Learn, and hopefully I'll see you at the next Performance Puzzle webinar in about a month's time. Thank you very much, everybody. Feel free to log off whenever's right for you. Thank you.